Why did nobody react when it happened? Why did 20 recruits, half the training staff, and a senior instructor all freeze, while the woman they just seen elbowed in the face quietly stood back up? They said it was an accident. They said, "Shake it off, Commander." But the truth was simpler. They just made the kind of mistake that doesn't bruise, it brands. The mats smelled like rubber and sweat when Lieutenant Commander Tara Reeves stepped into the gym that afternoon. The place had the echo of 1,000 grunts and falls bouncing off concrete walls like reminders of how respect was earned here. Dusty sunlight slanted through the high windows, painting chalk particles in the air. It should have been just another drill day, but something about the energy was off. She could feel it before she even said a word. 4 recruits were grappling near the center, muscles straining, boots squeaking, someone breathing too hard. Around them, instructors stood like judges at an arena, voices sharp, commands louder than necessary. Tara had seen this brand of leadership before, men mistaking noise for control. Chief Petty Officer Dahlin was one of them. Built like a battering ram, voice rough with that backslap confidence people confuse for authority. He saw Tara the moment she entered, grinning like a man seeing a challenge walk through the door. "Well, well, if it is Commander Reeves," he said, tone dripping with smugness. "Didn't think you'd be back so soon. Rehab clear you that fast?" "Faster than gossip," she replied. A few recruits chuckled. Dahlin didn't. He jerked his chin toward the mats. "Good timing. We're showing the boys how reality beats theory." She didn't like that phrasing. The boys. Like they weren't a mixed team, like discipline had a gender. But she didn't correct him. Instead, her eyes drifted across the mats, scanning posture, stance, reaction time, reading terrain the way SEALs do when silence speaks more than sound. One recruit caught her eye. Private Chen, small, focused, struggling against an opponent twice her size. Each time she tried, she got thrown the same way. No one corrected her. No one cared. Tara's jaw tightened. She'd seen that too many times, the small one told to just push harder. She stepped closer, calm, silent, watching Chen get thrown once more, the same pattern repeating. That's when she moved. "Stop," Tara said evenly. The recruits froze. Dahlin turned. "Reset," she told them. She knelt beside the girl, hands precise, tone quiet. "You're not redirecting his weight, you're fighting it. Shift your center line low and tight. Control the angle. The power's not in size, it's in timing." Dahlin chuckled behind her. "Guess the textbook speaks for itself." She didn't answer, just nodded for Chen to try again. The next grapple was different, cleaner, smoother, almost graceful. The smaller woman didn't win, but she didn't get thrown either. Balance restored. The gym fell quieter. Something invisible shifted. Not respect yet, but awareness. And Dahlin didn't like that. He walked closer, boots squeaking across the mat. "You know, Commander, manuals are one thing, combat another. Maybe the recruits need a little proof. They're learning fine." He waved the trainee off. "Nah, let's give him a show, timer on, you and me, friendly demo." Her body stilled. She knew that look, challenge disguised as camaraderie. He wanted to prove something. "This isn't necessary," she said. Dahlin smirked, worried I'll mess up your knee again. Her silence said more than words ever could. She unclipped her cap, dropped it by the mat. "Let's keep it light," he added, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No injuries today." They squared off. Marson, the gum-chewing instructor, lifted a stopwatch. "Ready." Tara nodded once. The whistle blew. Dahlin came in hard, too hard. She sidestepped, redirected his weight, used his forward momentum to drop him clean on the mat. A perfect counter. Textbook. The recruits murmured, impressed. She released, stepped back, giving him room to reset. But Dahlin didn't. He lunged again, rougher this time, no restraint, no discipline. He caught her wrist and twisted too far, deliberate torque. She countered, broke free, rolled away. Professional, clean. But his pride wasn't professional. He came again, faster, heavier, louder. The sweep caught her ankle, her back hit the mat. She rolled, regained footing. "Enough," she said quietly. He ignored it. And then the elbow. A flash of movement, bone met bone. The crack small but final. The sound cut through the room like glass snapping underfoot. Tara staggered, hand to her face, blood sliding slow from her lip. Dahlan froze, chest heaving, realization dawning too late. Nobody moved. Not the recruits, not the instructors. The silence was thick, the kind that feels like pressure in the air. She straightened, wiped her lip with her thumb, looked him straight in the eye. "Demo's over." And she walked off the mat. No shouting, no storm, just silence, and that was worse. Behind her, Dahlan looked around for someone to validate him. Nobody did. Recruits stared at the floor. Private Chen stood frozen near the wall, eyes wide. Marson tried to speak. "Chief, maybe we should." "She's fine," Dahlan muttered. "It's contact training." But his voice cracked. The others didn't believe it. The energy had shifted from tension to shame. When Tara left the gym, the air seemed to follow her out, the whole place deflated. The corridor hummed with the buzz of fluorescent lights. She walked alone. No limp, no weakness, just steady rhythm. Her cheek burned. Blood had dried. She didn't stop at medical. Paperwork couldn't fix culture. It only hid it under signatures. The locker room was empty, cold, sterile, echoing. She faced the mirror. A bruise already blooming purple under her left eye, lip split just enough to sting when she breathed. She turned on the tap, rinsed the blood away, watched it swirl pink down the drain. For a second her reflection blurred, not just from water, but memory. She saw surf pounding against her during SEAL selection years ago. Coronado Beach, gray dawn, waves taller than men, voices shouting through wind and salt. "You don't belong here." Her younger self half buried in sand, lungs burning, refusing to quit. And she remembered the instructor with the prosthetic leg who'd stopped beside her, voice low, calm. "Never fight their noise. Outlast it. You earn respect by never asking for it." She built her entire career on that sentence. The faucet hissed to silence. The memory faded. Tara sat on the bench, breath steady, mind sorting through what came next. Her phone buzzed. A message from her sister in Sacramento, an elementary school teacher, civilian, innocent to all this. "How's the knee holding up?" Tara typed back, "Good, getting stronger." She didn't mention the bruise, or the elbow, or the silence that followed it. Her hand drifted to her locker. She pulled out a black binder, training protocols, CQB evaluations, tomorrow's schedule. At the top, Phase 4 reaction control drills. That's when the idea came. Not revenge, not payback, just correction. The kind that doesn't raise its voice. The kind that shows, not tells. She flipped to Section 7, Instructor Evaluation Standards. Every instructor had to demonstrate mastery before teaching recruits, blindfolded reflex tests, non-escalation under pressure, recorded response time. She traced the printed words with her finger. Dahlan hadn't done it. None of them had. They'd been skipping it for years. Tomorrow, she thought, they'll remember why rules exist. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Petty Officer Hayes, quiet, dependable, one of the few who noticed more than he said. "Dahlan's already spinning it. Says you couldn't handle full contact." Tara stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she set it down. Let him spin. The truth didn't need to chase rumors. It just needed daylight. She exhaled slow. The pain had settled into something else now. Not anger, not fear, just clarity. Tomorrow, she wouldn't raise her voice. Tomorrow she would teach. Because revenge is emotion, and emotion is noise. But lessons leave echoes. She stood, adjusted her collar, looked once more at the mirror. The bruise glared back like a warning light under her eye. She smiled faintly. Control, not vengeance. Timing, not talk. That's what separates strength from spectacle. And tomorrow morning, on those same blue mats, every person who laughed today would learn the difference. What do you do the night before you're about to teach someone a lesson they don't know they need? Do you rehearse revenge or restraint? Tara didn't sleep much. She never did before evaluations, but this time the restlessness wasn't about logistics. It was about clarity, that razor edge between discipline and payback. The base was silent after 2200. Wind pressed against the metal siding of the training facility, making it creak like an old ship. Somewhere down the hall, a vending machine hummed, one fluorescent tube flickering in rhythm with her thoughts. She sat at her desk, binder open, highlighting sections of protocol she already knew by heart. Phase 4, reaction control drills. The blindfold test. Minimal force, zero escalation, precision over power. She read it again, slower this time, letting every clause settle in her bones. This wasn't about bending rules. It was about living them so perfectly that no one could question the outcome. On the corner of the desk, her phone buzzed, another message. From Hayes again. Word going around. Dolan's telling everyone it was mutual contact. She typed back, noted. That was all. Outside her window, the floodlights washed the compound in pale gold. Trucks idled near the motor pool. Somewhere, a late-night run echoed down the tarmac, the rhythmic thud of boots and breath. Discipline had a sound. So did arrogance. And tomorrow, one of them would drown the other out. Tara closed the binder, stood, stretched the stiffness from her knee. The joint clicked softly, a souvenir from a mission she never talked about, one where the sea had been black and the silence deeper than fear. She rolled her leg gently, testing balance, still solid. She caught her reflection in the window, hair tied back, bruise fading from purple to yellow. She looked more alive than she had in weeks. The next morning came early. 500. The sky above the base glowed steel blue, the kind of light that makes everything look colder than it is. She was already in the gym by the time the first recruits arrived. No music, no chatter, just her, the mats, and the faint scent of disinfectant and chalk. She set the blindfolds neatly in a line, laid out clipboards, adjusted the cameras to record from 3 angles, everything by the book, which was exactly the point. By 700, the room filled with sound again, boots stomping, laughter, that artificial confidence soldiers wore like armor. Then Dolan walked in. Fresh uniform, fresh grin, same arrogance. He carried the kind of swagger that made people glance at him first, listen second. Morning, Commander, he called, stretching the title like a joke. You here to demo again? Tara stood centered on the mat, clipboard in hand, calm as stone. No demo, she said. Today's Phase 4, reaction control evaluation. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone whispered, blindfold day. Dolan raised a brow. The blindfold dance, haven't done that one in years. That's the problem, Tara replied. Markson, already chewing gum, laughed. So what, we just stand there waiting to get tapped? Not waiting, Tara said. Listening, reacting, only when touched. No anticipation, no ego, just control. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The recruits quieted automatically, as if some instinct told them they were about to see something worth remembering. You'll all run through it later, she continued. But first, instructors demonstrate. That stopped everything. Even the gum-chewing halted. Dolan frowned. Us first, what were the warm-up act? You're the standard, Tara said. For a second, nobody breathed. Then Dolan laughed again, too loud, forced. Fine, Commander. Let's see what patience looks like with a blindfold on. He and Markson stepped forward, unlacing boots, setting them aside. The mats squeaked under bare feet. Tara handed them each a strip of black cloth. "Mask on," she ordered. "Hands at sides, breathe normally." They obeyed, grinning like men who thought they were about to win. The recruits lined the wall. Hayes stood at the edge, arms crossed, watching quietly. Tara moved in. She placed her fingertips lightly on Dahlon's shoulder, just enough contact to register. He reacted instantly, a grab, a pivot, an instinctive counter. Wrong move. She flowed under his arm, redirected his momentum, and swept his legs in one smooth motion. He hit the mat flat. Hard. No words, just the sound of breath leaving his lungs. Before the recruits could even murmur, she stepped to Markson. Touched his elbow. He flinched, swung wild, blind panic. She ducked, caught his wrist, rotated, and pinned him before his brain caught up with his body. Her knee stopped an inch short of his sternum, a warning, not a wound. "Reset," she said softly. They got up slower this time. "Second round." She touched Dahlon's wrist. He tried to pull away, wrong again. She used his own motion to unbalance him, sweeping him clean off his feet. The mat shook. Markson's turn, a light tap on his shoulder blade. He spun, overcommitted. She sidestepped and folded him forward, a perfect takedown powered only by his own inertia. By now the recruits weren't whispering. They were silent, learning. Round 3. Sweat beaded on Dahlon's temple beneath the blindfold. She touched his collarbone, nothing aggressive, just presence. He tried to trap her hand, grab, twist, muscle through the contact. She slipped out, turned inside his guard, collapsed his posture with a forearm press. He hit the mat again. Marson grunted, "She's not even." "Quiet," Hayes muttered beside him. Tara went again, tap, redirect, drop, control. 5 rounds in total, each one smaller, sharper, quieter. Each one a master class in what discipline really looks like when ego dies. By the 5th, nobody dared breathe loud. She removed the blindfolds. The silence rang like a bell. "Discipline," she said quietly, "means reacting when needed. Not before, not after, no ego, no noise, just timing and control." Her gaze held on Dahlon a second longer than the others. He couldn't meet it. She looked at the recruits. "You all saw what happened yesterday." A few glances flickered. Nobody spoke. "I didn't raise my voice," she continued. "I didn't retaliate, I waited." She glanced at her clipboard. "And today I responded." No applause, just a heavy kind of respect that fills a room like weight. That's when the doors banged open. Lieutenant Phelps stormed in, clipboard in hand, uniform half-creased, eyes sharp with confusion and irritation. "I was told this was a standard eval, not whatever this is," he snapped. "It is," Tara said calmly. "Standard reaction control drill, all pre-cleared under your signature." He looked around, recruits lined up like statues, Dahlon red-faced, Markson exhausted. Phelps grabbed the binder on the bench, flipped it open. His eyes tracked the lines of protocol, his own signature printed neatly at the bottom. He swallowed hard. "This is about yesterday." "This is about standards," she said, "the same ones you signed off on. You're using protocol as a weapon. I'm using it as intended." He stared at her for a long moment, anger warring with realization. "You've made your point," he said finally. "They're both exhausted. You've embarrassed them enough." "Discipline isn't about embarrassment," Tara replied. "It's about demonstration. They need to see what control looks like." "They've seen it." "Have they?" Her tone stayed level, but something in it carried the force of truth. Phelps stepped closer. "You're playing a dangerous game, Commander." She met his gaze. "No, I'm teaching the one they forgot." For a moment nobody moved. Then Phelps exhaled, tried to straighten his jacket. "Fine, you've run your drill, dismiss them." But Tara didn't move. Instead, she walked to the edge of the mat, picked up the training baton regulation foam core, reinforced handle, standard issue. Then she tossed it underhand to him. "Blindfold me." Phelps blinked. "What?" "Blindfold me," she repeated. "I'm not participating in the charade." "You already are." The recruits exchanged glances. Hayes shifted forward slightly, unsure. Tara turned to Private Carter, the young woman who'd been quiet all morning. "Carter, tie it." The recruit moved, hands steady despite the tremor in her breath. She tied the cloth snugly across Tara's eyes. The room hushed. Tara stood straight, body loose but grounded, palms open. Her breathing slowed until you could almost count the rhythm between inhale and exhale. "Lieutenant," she said quietly, "if you think this is about sending a message, you'd better be sure I can't deliver one blind." Phelps hesitated. Then pride did what pride always does. It moved faster than reason. He raised the baton. The air shifted. Tara felt it, the faintest rush before motion, the tremor of cloth against air. She stepped in, caught his wrist, twisted smooth and exact. The baton dropped. She followed the motion, low and controlled, pressing the soft edge against his throat. Not violent, just inevitable. He froze. The recruits barely breathed. "Contact," she whispered, "is a contract. You hit me." She leaned closer, voice low enough for only him to hear. "You sign for what comes next." Then she released him. Phelps stumbled back, gasping. And before anyone could react, a new voice cut through the room. "Lieutenant." Every head turned. The base commander stood in the doorway, arms folded, eyes hard. He'd seen everything. "Sir," Phelps began, but the commander didn't look at him. His gaze locked on Tara. "Continue," he said quietly. "I'll be observing." Tara nodded once, removed her blindfold, stepped back to center mat. "Next pair." And the drill went on. No fear now, no laughter, only respect. The kind that doesn't need sound to be heard. That evening, the story spread like electricity. From one corridor to another, from mess hall to barracks, voices whispered the same line over and over. "She disarmed a lieutenant blind." Some said it was legend. Some said it was proof. Tara called it Tuesday. She walked through the corridor later that night, lights dimmed to amber, the day's echoes still vibrating in her chest. Not pride, not satisfaction, just stillness, the kind you earn when you've said everything without words. Tomorrow would bring questions, reports, politics, but tonight there was only quiet. And somewhere deep in that quiet, a truth pulsed steady as her heartbeat. Strength isn't loud, it's precise. And patience, when mastered, is the loudest power of all. How fast does a rumor move through a military base? Faster than radio. Faster than light. And sometimes faster than truth. By evening, everyone had heard a version of what happened. Some said Tara humiliated the instructors on purpose. Others said she disarmed a superior officer blindfolded. And a few whispered the word everyone else avoided: revenge. But inside Tara Reeves's mind, there was no victory, only stillness. The kind that settles after a storm when you can finally hear your own breath again. She was back in her office, uniform clean, bruise fatting, paperwork neatly stacked in rows. Every page filed, every signature ready. The cameras had recorded everything. She didn't have to say a word. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the wall clock, slow, even, relentless. At 1900 hours sharp, a knock sounded at her door. "Enter," she said. Lieutenant Phelps stepped in, face tight, clipboard under his arm. He looked different now, smaller somehow, not because of rank but because of exposure. "Commander Reeves," he started, tone measured, like someone walking through a minefield. "The base commander wants you in the briefing room in 10. She nodded once, understood. He lingered, as if he wanted to add something, but couldn't decide if it would make things better or worse. Then he left without another word. Tara straightened her jacket, checked her collar, and headed down the corridor. The hallway lights were dimmer at night, the hum of ventilation louder than usual. Each step echoed. She could hear muffled voices ahead, the low, rehearsed tones of officers trying to make chaos sound procedural. She pushed the door open. Inside, the command briefing room looked sterile, long oak table, polished floor, and a single screen at the far end looping muted CCTV footage from the gym. In the room, the base commander, Phelps, Chief Dahlin, and Petty Officer Markson. No flags, no crowd, no rank displays, just the truth caught on camera. The commander didn't speak immediately. He let the footage play in silence. There it was, a frozen mid-frame. Dahlin's elbow. Tara's face turning from the impact. Blood. Silence. He paused the video, still not looking at anyone. "Tell me," he said finally, voice even but cold, "is this what we call controlled contact?" The air thickened. Nobody answered. "Chief Dahlin," the commander said again, softer this time, "you have 30 seconds to explain this footage." Dahlin swallowed hard. His eyes didn't lift. "Sir, it was a sparring drill. Things happened fast. I misjudged the distance. It wasn't intentional." "You misjudged nothing," the commander replied. The calmness in his tone was sharper than shouting. "You struck a senior officer in the face, after she called the drill, in front of 20 recruits." Dahlin's throat moved as he tried to find words. "Sir, with respect." "You'll speak when I ask," the commander cut him off. The silence that followed was heavy enough to bow the air. He turned his gaze toward Phelps. "You signed off on Phase 4 protocol 3 months ago. Instructor evaluation standards. Blindfolded reflex drills required before teaching recruits." Phelps's jaw tightened. "Yes, sir." "When was the last time either of these men completed that evaluation?" The question hit like a hammer. I'd have to check the records." "I already did," the commander said. "The answer is never." A beat of stillness followed. Markson shifted in his chair, eyes darting between the floor and the wall. The commander folded his hands. "So from where I'm sitting, it appears an instructor elbowed a senior SEAL combat leader in the face, after she stopped the drill, without provocation, without apology." Markson opened his mouth to speak. "Sir, I believe the intent was to—" "Stop," the commander said, barely raising his voice. He pressed play again. The footage continued, Tara wiping her lip, standing, leaving the mat without a word. Then the second file loaded, this morning's blindfold drill, the one where she dropped both men 5 times in a row. They all watched in silence as the recording played out, the precision, the timing, the patience. Dahlin's failures stacking up frame by frame until pride itself looked fragile. When the video ended, the commander turned to Tara. "What I saw wasn't retaliation," he said quietly. "It was restraint." Her eyes didn't move from the screen. He continued, "Professional, surgical, controlled. That's the kind of discipline I expect from someone wearing the trident." Finally, he faced Dahlin and Markson. "As of now, both of you are suspended from instructional duties pending review. Lieutenant Phelps, your oversight role will be reevaluated next week." Nobody argued. Nobody even exhaled loudly. The commander rose from his seat. "Control under pressure isn't just a skill," he said. "It's a reflection of who you are. And what I saw from Commander Reeves today is what leadership looks like when integrity meets training." He turned toward Tara. "You may go." She gave a slight nod, not a salute, not a smile, just acknowledgement. As she left the room, she could still hear the faint buzz of the screen behind her. The paused frame of Dahlin mid-strike stared back from the wall, a reminder of how easily noise can expose itself. Outside, the night air felt colder than before. The corridor lights shimmered on polished floors. Somewhere down the hall, she heard the faint laughter of recruits in the mess hall, too young to understand how leadership actually worked. Hayes was waiting near the stairwell, leaning against the wall. "They call it justice," he said quietly as she approached. "No," Tara replied. "They call it paperwork. Justice doesn't file itself." He gave a small smile, the kind soldiers trade when words feel clumsy. "Rumor mill's already spinning again," he added. "Some say you embarrassed half the command chain." She looked past him, expression unreadable. If truth embarrasses them, they've been lying too long. He nodded, then hesitated. "Ma'am, for what it's worth, that was the cleanest takedown I've ever seen, blindfolded or not." She didn't respond right away. Her eyes drifted toward the gym through the glass panel at the end of the hallway, still lights on, still the smell of sweat and echoing memory. "Clean doesn't always mean easy," she said finally. "Sometimes control hurts more than a hit." Hayes didn't understand then, but he would. They all would. Later, the mess hall was alive with murmurs. Trays clattering, forks tapping, conversations darting from table to table like sparks. Hayes sat with 3 other instructors. "I'm telling you," he said, lowering his voice. "She ran them 5 rounds, dropped them every time, barely moved. It was like watching a chess player fight boxers." One of the younger men frowned. "You sure she wasn't showing off?" Hayes shook his head. She didn't even smirk, didn't gloat, just precision, like she was proving gravity still works. Across the hall, a group of recruits sat huddled, whispering the same story, words passing like a game of telephone. Private Chen leaned in, eyes sharp. "She didn't even break a sweat," she said. "And when Lieutenant Phelps tried to challenge her, she disarmed him blind." A recruit beside her laughed softly. "That's impossible." Chen's tone hardened. "I saw the footage. It's not impossible. It's trained. She didn't do it to humiliate him. She did it to remind us what training's supposed to mean." The table went quiet. Another voice, older, steady, a senior trainee, former ranger, said quietly, "That's what separates the real ones from the loud ones. The real ones don't have to prove anything. They just are." The sentence hung there, heavy and true. Across the room, Hayes glanced toward the entrance, saw Tara walking past. She didn't enter, didn't stop, just moved through the noise like it wasn't even there. He raised his coffee in a quiet salute. She nodded once without slowing her stride. That single exchange said more than applause ever could. The gym was empty by nightfall. Lights dimmed, air cool, the faint smell of sweat still clinging to the mats. Tara stood alone in the center, hands wrapped, striking the heavy bag in slow rhythm. 1-2, 1-2. No anger, no aggression, just control. Each hit sounded like punctuation, soft, clean, final. She paused, rolled her shoulders, listened to the quiet hum of the building. The bruise under her eye was fading. The ache in her jaw was almost gone. The door creaked open behind her. "Ma'am." She turned slightly. A young recruit stood there, the same one who tied her blindfold that morning. "I'm not interrupting, am I?" "No," Tara said, lowering her gloves. The recruit stepped closer, hesitant but sincere. "I just wanted to say thank you." Tara tilted her head. "For what?" "For not yelling, for not losing control, for showing that strength doesn't need to scream." The girl's voice trembled near the end, but her eyes didn't. Tara let the silence stretch before answering. "It's not about fighting back," she said softly. "It's about teaching them you don't break that easily." The recruit nodded. "Well, it worked." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "See you on the mat tomorrow, ma'am." "Early," Tara replied. The door closed. Tara faced the bag again, set her stance. Breath in, 1. Breath out, 2. Each strike echoed down the hallway, soft, rhythmic, controlled. Discipline, not noise. Control, not vengeance. The bruise would fade, the whispers would fade, but the lesson that would stay. Sometimes power doesn't shout. Sometimes it just stands, quiet and unshaken, until the room learns how to listen. And that night, under the hum of the base lights and the steady rhythm of her breath, Tara Reeves knew something simple, something final. Dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. What happens after the dust settles? After the apology you'll never hear, and the truth no one can deny. What's left when silence becomes your only answer, and the whole base learns to listen? For Lieutenant Commander Tara Reeves, the next morning wasn't about glory. It was about paperwork, as always. The quiet kind of aftermath that hides behind clipped signatures and regulation stamps. She sat in her office early, sunlight cutting sharp lines across her desk. The gym incident was already a story stretched, twisted, retold, but she didn't chase it. She just filled out reports, checked schedules, read messages. The bruise under her eye had turned from deep purple to faint yellow, a fading echo of everything that had happened. Her door opened without a knock. Commander Reeves. It was Lieutenant Phelps. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from pride being stripped bare. "Morning, sir," Tara said without looking up. He lingered at the threshold. "Base commander wants your report on his desk by 1400. "It'll be there." He hesitated, the silence stretched, awkward but honest. Finally he spoke. "Look, I should have stepped in sooner." She looked up then, calm, unreadable. "You didn't," she said simply. Phelps nodded, shame flickering through his face. "You made your point." "I didn't make a point," Tara said softly. "I reminded people of a standard. The point made itself." He didn't have an answer for that. He just nodded and left. Tara watched him go, not angry, not bitter, just thoughtful. Because even when justice comes, it never feels clean. It just feels necessary. By noon, the whispers had spread beyond the base. Someone uploaded the training footage to an internal review drive. For documentation, they claimed, but it didn't stay contained for long. Within hours, officers in other divisions were calling, asking questions, replaying the clips frame by frame. The moment when Dalin's elbow struck. The silence that followed. Then the next day, the blindfold, the reversal, the disarm. Some called it discipline. Others called it defiance. But everyone called it unforgettable. In the mess hall, the talk never stopped. "You hear she made Phelps drop the baton." "She didn't make him, he tried to hit her." "Still blindfolded." "Yeah, that's what they say." And somewhere between rumor and reality, respect began to take shape. Private Chin heard it all. Every whisper, every embellished retelling, every half-truth bent into admiration. But she also remembered something the others missed. The silence in Tara's eyes when she walked away from the mat, before the applause, before the awe. That silence wasn't victory. It was something else. That night Tara skipped dinner. She stayed in the gym long after lights out, wrapping her hands, working the bag. The rhythm was steady. 1-2, breathe, reset. Each strike punctuated by something invisible, not anger, not pain, just the echo of what she'd learned over years of service. Discipline isn't calmness. It's choosing calmness when chaos would be easier. The heavy bag swayed. The sound of leather and breath filled the quiet. And beneath that rhythm, her thoughts returned to the man who had elbowed her, Dalin. She'd trained with worse, been hit harder, been underestimated longer. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that he'd forgotten what it meant to teach. She could still see his face when he hit her, not rage, not hatred, just the hollow reflex of ego, the same reflex she'd seen destroy more than one career. He'd learned something that day, even if he never said it out loud. 2 days later, she was summoned to the commander's office. The corridor outside was lined with portraits, generations of officers, each froze in mid-salute, faces carved into history. She walked past them quietly, her boots striking the tile in soft rhythm. The commander's aide nodded her in. "Go ahead, ma'am, he's expecting you." Tara entered. The room was larger than necessary: oak desk, framed maps, sunlight spilling through blinds. The base commander sat behind his desk, no papers in front of him, just a mug of coffee going cold. "Commander Reeves," he said, gesturing for her to sit. She remained standing. "Sir." He studied her for a moment, not evaluating, not interrogating, just observing. "You've made quite an impression," he said finally. "I didn't intend to, sir." "I know, that's why it worked." A small silence. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "You understand what happens next, right?" "Yes, sir." "There'll be paperwork, reviews, internal reports. Dahlin and Markson will be reassigned, possibly discharged. Phelps will face an oversight inquiry." Tara nodded. "But you," he paused, "you'll be moved off the training rotation." She didn't flinch. "May I ask why, sir?" He sighed. "Because sometimes the system doesn't know what to do with people who are right the wrong way." The words hung in the air like fog. Then, softer, "You didn't do anything wrong, Commander. You followed protocol better than anyone else. But command doesn't like spectacle, even when it's justified." She took that in silently. "I'm not punishing you," he added. "I'm protecting you. There's a difference." Tara nodded once, understood. He studied her again. "If you ever decide to transfer, I'll sign your orders personally. Any unit, any coast." "I'm fine where I am, sir." "I don't doubt that," he said with a faint smile. "But remember, sometimes silence echoes louder than noise, and you've already made your echo." She gave a small nod. "Permission to speak freely, sir." "Granted." "I didn't do it to make a point. I did it to remind them what happens when respect becomes optional." The commander leaned back, eyes narrowing with a trace of admiration. "And you did exactly that." After the meeting, Tara walked out into the open air. The wind coming off the bay carried the scent of salt and steel. The afternoon sun cut across the water, blinding and beautiful. She stood there for a long moment, watching the tide roll against the docked boats, the whitecaps flashing like thoughts she hadn't yet processed. Sometimes, she thought, leadership isn't about shouting orders. It's about outlasting noise. Her knee ached faintly, the old scar tissue tightening when the wind turned cold. She shifted weight, smiled at the discomfort, small reminders that she'd survived worse than words. By dusk, the base had calmed. Recruits training quietly, instructors subdued. Dahlin's absence felt heavier than expected, proof that when noise leaves the room, it takes something hollow with it. Private Chen found herself leading drills now unofficially, but everyone followed her rhythm. Tara watched from the side, hands folded, saying little. The girl moved well, quick, sharp, humble, the kind of student who learns not by copying but by noticing. Tara waited until the session ended before stepping forward. "Good work, Chen," she said. "Thank you, ma'am." "You've got balance, use it." The recruit hesitated. "Permission to ask a question, ma'am." "Go ahead." "Why didn't you hit him back?" The question wasn't naive, it was honest. Tara looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because if I had, that's all anyone would remember." Chen nodded slowly, understanding flickering behind her eyes. "Discipline isn't silence," Tara added. "It's direction. Control where the energy goes, or someone else will control it for you." Chen smiled faintly. "I think I get it." "Good," Tara said, "then teach it." That night, Tara sat alone in her quarters. Her sister had sent another text, a picture this time. Kids in Halloween costumes, smiling in a classroom. The message underneath read, "Wish you were here. You'd make a great story for them." Tara smiled, typed back slowly, "Not all stories need telling." Then she set the phone aside and leaned back in her chair. Outside, floodlights glowed along the perimeter fence. Distant laughter echoed from the rec yard. Somewhere, a song played softly from a recruit's window, country, off-key, too sentimental. She didn't mind. She closed her eyes, breathing in the rhythm of the bass. That heartbeat of machinery, ocean, and discipline, all layered into one long exhale. This was her world, imperfect, bruised, beautiful. And even if they reassigned her, even if the stories got twisted, one truth would stay. She didn't flinch, she didn't shout, she just stood. And that was enough. Weeks later, the official report circulated. The incident summarized in 12 sentences of bureaucratic language. Minor contact during training resulted in evaluation. No injuries sustained. Commander Reeves demonstrated exemplary conduct under provocation. Recommendation: reassigned to advanced leadership development. 12 sentences. That's all it took to bury the noise. But the recruits didn't forget. Neither did the instructors. Every time someone shouted louder than necessary, someone else would whisper, "Remember what happened when they elbowed the seal." And the room would quiet itself. Respect, once broken, had been rebuilt, not through orders, not through punishment, but through example. Tara's example. The next time she stepped onto the mat, it was quieter. Recruits focused, instructors attentive. She didn't have to raise her voice. She didn't even need to remind them why. They already knew. Her presence was enough. And as she corrected Private Chen's stance, a thought crossed her mind, simple, fleeting, but profound. Maybe power isn't about commanding attention. Maybe it's about deserving it. As the day ended, she walked past the mirror in the locker room one last time. The bruise was gone. The reflection was. Behind her eyes lived every silence she'd chosen over rage. Every lesson earned through patience. Every moment when the easy thing would have been to break. She smiled, not the smile of satisfaction, but of peace. Because in a world that worships noise, sometimes the quietest person in the room changes everything. What happens after the lesson, been taught? When the noise fades, the crowd forgets, and only the echoes remain. Do you rest or rebuild? For Lieutenant Commander Tara Reeves, there was no downtime. Only reassignment orders. They came through on a Tuesday morning, quiet, clinical, sealed with a line that said more than any explanation could. Effective immediately. Transfer to Naval Leadership Assessment and Candidate Development Wing. No reason, no meeting, just relocation. She'd expected it. The system doesn't celebrate precision, it files it away. Her locker was half empty by noon. A single duffel, one folder marked Reeves Instructor Clearance. She packed slowly, folding each piece of uniform like ritual. The fabric smelled of salt and rubber mats and years of repetition. When she turned, Hayes was in the doorway. He didn't speak right away, just watched. "So it's true," he said finally. Tara zipped the duffel. "Orders came through this morning." "Leadership wing," he repeated. "That's a desk job." "Depends on the desk," she said. He half smiled, but his eyes betrayed disappointment. "They should be giving you a unit, not paperwork." "I don't need a unit," she replied, "just a purpose." He nodded once, jaw tight. "You gave us one." She looked up then, softly, without armor. "Keep it." There was a pause, the kind that happens when words aren't enough. Then Hayes saluted, not the crisp kind, but the human kind. "Good luck out there, ma'am." "You too," she said. He left. And that was that. The drive north was long. 200 miles of coastline rolling past the window, gray ocean, darker clouds, seagulls slicing through wind. The new base was smaller, quieter. No shouting across yards, no recruits running drills at dawn. Just office buildings, training pods, and a single hangar repurposed for candidate evaluations. Tara parked near the barracks. The air smelled of pine instead of diesel, strange but clean. Inside, the admin sergeant glanced up from his desk. "Commander Reeves, right? Welcome to ALDC Wing." He handed her a folder. "You're slated to oversee leadership ethics and decision-making under pressure. Starts next week." "Copy that," she said. He hesitated, lowering his voice. "Heard some things about you, ma'am, the kind that travel faster than files." Tara gave a faint smile. "Rumors move quicker than orders, they always have." He grinned. "Well, these ones sound worth hearing." She didn't answer, just took the folder and walked out. Her new quarters overlooked a stretch of forest. No sea, no surf, just the hum of cicadas and the distant whine of generators. The first night she couldn't sleep. The silence was too different, too still. She sat by the window, reading through the next week's training outline. The course was built for officers, not recruits, people who already thought they knew what leadership meant. That would make it harder. Harder and maybe more important. She flipped through the candidate profiles. Lieutenant Keller, top of his class, cocky. Lieutenant Shaw, sharp, defensive. Ensign Monroe, young, eager, and secure. All of them talented, none of them tested where it mattered, under pressure without control. That she could teach. By the time dawn painted the sky, she was already in the hangar. Mats laid out, dummy rifles stacked in a row, notebooks clipped open. When the officers filed in, they looked confused. This didn't look like a lecture hall. It looked like a proving ground. "Morning, ma'am," Keller said, the first to speak. His tone had confidence but no respect yet. "Morning," Tara replied. She waited until everyone settled before starting. "Today's exercise is called Command Silence. You'll lead blindfolded units through an obstacle sequence. You'll give no verbal orders, only pressure cues and movement." Keller frowned. "Ma'am, with all due respect, how's that leadership?" "Because if you can't lead without shouting," Tara said evenly, "you can't lead at all." The words landed. They began the drill. Keller went first, impatient, overcorrecting. His team stumbled. Shaw followed, overthinking, freezing mid-command. Monroe tried last, hesitant at first, then finding rhythm. She moved with instinct instead of control. Tara watched each one silently, noting not their mistakes, but their reactions to them. When it ended, Keller pulled off his blindfold, frustrated. "That's impossible. You can't control chaos without orders." Tara stepped forward. "Then maybe you're not supposed to control it. Maybe you're supposed to listen to it." He blinked, thrown off. "Leadership isn't noise," she said softly. "It's rhythm. You find it, you guide it. You lose it, you scream. Which one do you want to be?" No one answered. That night she wrote her evaluation reports by hand, the way she always did. Her words were sparse, measured. "Candidate demonstrates initiative but lacks discipline in emotional regulation. Recommends silent command exercises." She paused after that line, pen hovering. How many times had those same words been written about her years ago? Too emotional, too quiet, too different. Funny how the labels changed, meaning with rank. She smiled faintly, closed the folder and leaned back. For the first time in weeks, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself since the incident, peace. Not because she was vindicated, but because she was useful again. A week later, she walked into the mess for breakfast and froze at the sound of familiar laughter. At a corner table sat Private Chin, now in candidate uniform, newer patch, same calm eyes. The girl looked up surprised. "Commander Reeves." Tara blinked. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Got accepted to officer candidate school," Chen said proudly. "They said I had potential. I told them who taught me control." Tara smiled. "Congratulations." Chen's grin softened. They still talk about you back there, about the blindfold drill. Tara raised an eyebrow. That story's still alive. Oh, more than alive, it's practically folklore. Tara shook her head. Folklore fades. Chen leaned forward. Not when it teaches something real. The moment stretched teacher and student, two quiet soldiers linked by discipline. Enjoy your meal, candidate, Tara said finally. Yes, ma'am. As Tara walked away, she caught Chen's reflection in the mess hall glass, smiling, steady, confident. The kind of confidence born from patience, not praise. It reminded her why she stayed. Weeks blurred into months. The leadership wing grew sharper under her watch. Officers who once rolled their eyes at her methods began to quote her phrases in their own drills. React late, not early. Wait for the noise to settle before moving. Control isn't the absence of fear, it's the conversation you have with it. The irony wasn't lost on her. The woman they'd sidelined for being too precise had quietly reshaped their definition of leadership. No headlines, no commendations, just change, spreading one lesson at a time. One evening, after a long day of evaluations, she received a message marked Internal Command Dispatch. It was from the base commander. Reeves, your methods are being integrated into Phase 4 curriculum across multiple units. Effective immediately. Thought you should know. Just that, no praise, no signature flourish. But it was enough. She stared at the message for a long time before closing her laptop. Outside, the last light of sunset filtered through the trees. The air smelled of rain. She stepped out onto the walkway, hands in her pockets, the quiet hum of cicadas fading into distance. She thought about everything that had happened. The hit, the silence, the blindfold, the control. None of it had been about winning. It had been about remembering who she was when the world tried to make her forget. The system had moved her. The rumors had reshaped her story. But the truth had stayed intact. You can't exile integrity. You can only reassign it. A week later, Keller approached her after a drill. Ma'am. Yes, Lieutenant. He hesitated. I just wanted to say, when I first got here, I thought you were all about control. Now I realize it's more than that. Tara tilted her head. What is it then? He met her gaze. Respect for yourself, for the silence between orders. She gave a rare, genuine smile. Then maybe you're finally ready to lead. He nodded, standing taller. Thank you, ma'am. She turned away, walking toward the exit. The hangar doors were open, sunlight spilling across the mats, warm and golden. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of proving anything. She'd already proved it. Not through strength, through stillness. That night before lights out, she found herself back in the training hall, alone again. Old habit. She slipped off her boots, stepped onto the mat barefoot, the air cool against her skin. The echoes of drills, long finished, hung faintly in the space. She closed her eyes, centered her breathing. And for a heartbeat, she was back there, on that other mat with Dahlin, with the elbow, with 20 recruits watching. The memory didn't sting anymore. It just existed, like a scar that forgot to hurt. She whispered to the empty room, not as confession but as clarity. They didn't break me. They reminded me what not breaking looks like. The silence answered, steady and sure. Outside, the night deepened. The base lights glowed faint gold through the mist. Somewhere, a training bell rang, marking curfew. Tara stood at the doorway of the hangar, watching the darkness settle. People thought resilience was loud. They thought it roared, fought, conquered. But real resilience, it breathes. It waits. It stands. And sometimes, it walks away quietly, leaving the whole world a little more disciplined than before. How far does a lesson travel once it leaves your hands? Does it fade like a rumor, or grow into something larger than you ever intended? For Lieutenant Commander Tara Reeves, silence had turned into a signal, a quiet pulse that reached places even authority couldn't. It had been 3 months since the transfer. The forest air now felt like home, crisp, unhurried, unjudging. Every morning she walked the same route from her quarters to the hangar, coffee steaming in the cold, the sun cutting through pine. On the surface, everything looked ordinary. But something beneath the calm was shifting. Her curriculum, the same blindfolded drills and silent command exercises she'd refined from instinct, had begun spreading through the system. First quietly, then deliberately. Other divisions had started sending instructors for observation. Emails poured in with subject lines like Reeves Methodology, Field Adaptation Inquiry, and Phase 4 Revision Protocol. At first she ignored them. Then she didn't have to, because orders came down from command. Commander Reeves, prepare training integration brief for Naval Ethics and Tactical Behavior Symposium, Quantico. A presentation. Before senior officers. About control. She almost laughed when she read it. The same leadership network that had once buried her method under politics now wanted her to teach it publicly. She spent the next 2 weeks buried in preparation. Not for applause. For precision. Every word, every pause, every phrase rehearsed with surgical calm. No theatrics, no grandstanding, just truth the way she'd lived it. The night before the flight, she sat in her quarters reviewing the last slide, a quote she'd written years ago on a note card and kept folded inside her uniform pocket. Discipline isn't silence, it's direction. She stared at it for a long time before closing the laptop. Quantico smelled like jet fuel and ambition. The symposium hall gleamed, polished glass, flag-lined walls, uniforms as crisp as posture. Tara stood at the back before her slot, arms folded, watching other speakers, officers reciting metrics, graphs, retention rates, reports. Words heavy with authority, but light on understanding. When her turn came, the air shifted. A quiet curiosity followed her to the stage. Some recognized her name. Some had only heard fragments of the story. She adjusted the mic, scanned the faces. No nerves, just presence. "Good morning," she began. "I was asked to discuss restraint under pressure. The irony is, restraint doesn't perform well on stage." A few polite laughs. She continued, voice calm and measured. "When people hear discipline, they think compliance. But real discipline, the kind that survives chaos, is about control of self, not control of others." Her tone deepened, deliberate. 3 months ago, during a training session, an instructor struck me in front of 24 recruits. I didn't hit back. I didn't shout. I didn't write a complaint. Silence spread through the hall. I taught. She let the pause breathe. I taught what control looks like when no one else has it. And if you think that's weakness, then you've never seen what patience can do when it's weaponized. Someone in the audience exhaled audibly. Tara paced slowly, the kind of still movement that draws attention rather than demands it. "I'm not here to defend protocol," she said. "I'm here to remind you why it exists. Because rules don't make us disciplined. They measure who we are when we think no one's watching." When she finished, the room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The silence afterward was the loudest approval she could have asked for. A senior admiral approached her afterward, silver hair, reputation like iron. "Commander Reeves," he said, shaking her hand, "I read your after-action report months ago. Now I see why it read the way it did." "Sorry." He smiled faintly. Restraint reads different when it's written by someone who's mastered it. Then he leaned closer. "How would you feel about consulting for Officer Readiness Command, We need people who can teach this kind of discipline." She didn't answer right away. The offer sounded like a promotion. But she'd learned long ago that not every elevation takes you higher. "I'll think about it, sir," she said finally. "Fair enough," he replied, nodding. "Just don't take too long. The Navy's starting to realize control isn't quiet, it's contagious." By the time she returned to the leadership wing, things had changed. Her small hangar had grown into a full program. New candidates arrived weekly, some from other branches, some carrying notebooks already filled with her quotes. They called it Reeves' Doctrine. She hated the name. To her, it wasn't doctrine. It was survival. One afternoon, after an evaluation run, she found candidate Monroe, one of her earliest students, sitting alone by the training field, head down, shaking. "Problem, Monroe?" Tara asked, stepping closer. The young officer wiped her eyes quickly. "No, ma'am." Tara waited. Silence always drew truth faster than interrogation. Monroe finally spoke. "My squad failed the non-escalation test. They froze. I tried to control it, but—" "You tried to control it," Tara interrupted softly. "There's the problem." Monroe frowned. "Leadership isn't about forcing calm," Tara said. "It's about being the calm that others mirror." Monroe exhaled shakily. "I keep thinking, what if I can't be that?" Tara crouched beside her, voice quiet but steady. "You don't think calm, you practice it, until it replaces panic." Monroe looked at her, eyes red. "Was it hard for you?" Tara smiled faintly. "Every day." It was the first time she'd admitted it aloud. That night, as rain tapped the window, Tara reread an email she'd almost deleted earlier. From Chief Petty Officer Dahlin. Subject line, "Request for meeting." Message: "Commander Reeves, I heard about your reassignment and the new curriculum. Word is your methods changed the entire training chain. I won't ask for forgiveness, but I'd like to speak with you off record, if you'll allow it." She stared at it for minutes that felt like hours. Then she closed the laptop. Did forgiveness belong in discipline? Was ignoring him strength, or cowardice disguised as control? The next morning, she sent a 2-word reply. 1 hour. He arrived on time. Different base, same man, but not entirely. The swagger was gone. His uniform fit looser. His shoulders slumped slightly under weight unseen. They met in the hangar, the same space where she now taught others how to remain unbroken. "Commander," he greeted quietly. "Chief," she replied, not offering a hand. He nodded. "I didn't come to justify it." "Good," she said. "I came to tell you you were right." Tara studied him for a long moment. "About what?" "That control thing," he said with a humorless smile. "I thought being loud meant being heard. Turns out the quiet ones are the ones everyone still remembers." He looked around the hangar. The mats, the recruits in the distance, the name Reeves' Doctrine stenciled above the board. "You built something out of the mess I made." "No," Tara said softly. "I just stopped the noise from spreading." He exhaled. "Still, I wanted to say it face to face, I'm sorry." The words landed heavier than she expected. For a long time she didn't respond, just let the silence sit. Then she said quietly, "You don't owe me words. Just make sure you never put another recruit through ego training." He nodded. "You have my word." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "I used to think patience was weakness." He looked back at her. "Now I think it's the last kind of strength left." Then he walked out. And for the first time since the elbow, Tara felt something she hadn't let herself feel in months: closure. Not because he apologized, but because she realized she didn't need him to. Weeks passed. The leadership wing thrived. Candidates graduated with sharper minds, steadier hands, quieter confidence. During final evaluations, Monroe scored top marks. Keller passed his follow-up training. Chen, now Lieutenant Chen, was assigned as assistant instructor. The lineage continued. One night after everyone left, Tara stood in the middle of the mat alone again, the echo of footsteps fading around her. She closed her eyes. The sound of the sea still lived somewhere inside her, even this far from it. She thought of every lesson she'd taught since the day she was hit. Control, discipline, patience, and beneath them all, one truth that tied everything together. You can't teach respect by demanding it. You teach it by being the kind of calm that no storm can move. She took a slow breath and whispered to the quiet. Let them talk, let them learn, just keep the noise from leading. The next morning, a new memo arrived. Commander Reeves, you are hereby promoted to Program Director, Naval Leadership Development Initiative, effective immediately. No press release, no ceremony. Just acknowledgement the way she liked it. When she pinned the new insignia to her uniform, she didn't smile. She just stood before the mirror, steady, centered, quiet. Because that's what dignity does. It doesn't celebrate. It continues. Outside, sunlight hit the hangar windows like gold. Recruits lined up for morning drills, voices sharp, energy focused. As she stepped into the light, a hush spread naturally, not out of fear, out of reverence. She nodded once, let's begin. And as they started, she felt it again, that hum of control, that unspoken rhythm that carried through every voice, every step, every motion. Her silence had become their standard. And that was enough. Every doctrine, once it becomes useful, becomes dangerous. Not because of what it teaches, but because of who tries to own it. By the end of the year, the Reeves doctrine was everywhere. The manuals hadn't even been printed yet, but the ideas had already spread. Silence before escalation. Command through composure. Patience as force. Somewhere in D.C., someone decided those words looked good on a recruitment poster. They turned her lesson, born from blood, restraint, and humiliation, into a slogan. She saw the draft one morning in her inbox. A glossy image of a soldier mid-salute, captioned in bold. Control is combat, Reeves' method. She stared at it, coffee cooling beside her. Control was not combat. Control was the refusal to make everything a fight. She deleted the file, but you can't delete momentum. 2 weeks later, she was summoned to Washington. Pentagon briefing level, windowless conference room, 10 people in uniform who all spoke in bullet points. At the head sat Rear Admiral Grayson, sharp suit, calm smile, the kind of smile that tells you the decision's already been made. Commander Reeves, he said, voice practice smooth, your program has produced measurable results. Reduced training injuries, improved retention. You've become an asset. She nodded once, glad to hear the recruits are learning, sir. He exchanged glances with the others. That's not all. The Secretary of Defense wants the Reeves Doctrine codified into Joint Force Leadership training. You'd serve as senior consultant, with public representation authority. Public representation. Her stomach tightened around the phrase. What exactly does that mean, sir? It means your story becomes our story. Silence. Grayson continued. You'll give keynote addresses, appear in media segments, demonstrate the female discipline principle as part of Navy heritage. You'll inspire, recruit, motivate. She looked at him. You want to turn a bruise into branding. He chuckled politely. Into inspiration, Commander. The public loves redemption arcs. She said nothing. Another officer leaned forward. Frankly, ma'am, what happened in that gym, it's legend now. We might as well use it. Tara's voice stayed level. With respect, sir, you weren't there. That's precisely why people want to hear it. The room waited for her to agree. She didn't. Finally, Grayson folded his hands. We'll expect your answer by Monday. Decline, and the program may lose funding. Accept, and you'll have the platform to spread your philosophy worldwide. He smiled again. Think of it as leadership at scale. That night, her hotel room felt smaller than any barracks. Outside, Washington buzzed, taxis, sirens, the hum of ambition. Inside, silence pressed against her ribs. Leadership at scale. She whispered the words, tasting their irony. She remembered Coronado again, the surf pounding, her instructor with the prosthetic leg saying, "Never fight their noise, outlast it." But what if the noise wore medals now? What if the storm was polite? She opened her notebook and wrote one line across a blank page. Integrity dies quietly, one interview at a time. She closed it, slept badly. Morning brought sunlight like armor. She walked to the Potomac before the briefing, hands in her pockets, wine cold against her face. Her phone buzzed, a message from Lieutenant Chen, now fully commissioned. "Ma'am, we're still running the blindfold drills. They're calling it Reeves rounds. It works, they're calmer now they listen." Tara smiled, small and private. The rumor had outlived her, and that was enough. By Monday, she knew her answer. The conference room looked the same. Grayson looked impatient. "So, Commander, shall we move forward?" She set a folder on the table. Inside, a detailed proposal, thick with annotations. "I'll allow the program expansion," she said, "on one condition." Grayson raised an eyebrow, which is, "You don't use my name as a slogan. No commercials, no recruitment lines. No myth-making." He frowned. "Commander, that limits outreach." "It preserves truth," she interrupted. "I'll train instructors, I'll write the manual. But I won't become your headline." Grayson exhaled, slow irritation. "You realize declining visibility limits your influence." "I don't need visibility," she said. "I need fidelity." Silence again. Someone coughed. Grayson tapped the folder. "You're certain?" "Yes, sir." He studied her for a moment, then smiled, not kindly but conceding. "Fine, we'll proceed under operational discretion. But if media asks, we don't hide your story." "That's your call," Tara said. "Just tell it right." Back at the leadership wing, she found herself teaching more than technique now. She taught resistance, the quiet kind that refuses to trade honesty for approval. Her officers noticed. Keller, now a lieutenant himself, approached after a seminar. "Ma'am," he said, "if they ever turn your doctrine into politics, what do we do?" She looked at him. "You do what we've always done. Train quietly. Lead cleanly. And when noise gets loud, let it burn itself out." He nodded, writing it down as if it were scripture. But politics never sleeps. Within a month, the Navy's media bureau released a promotional video anyway. Not her words, not exactly, but close enough to sting. Clips of recruits sparring, a female voiceover saying, "Strength isn't noise, it's precision." Inspired by the Reeves doctrine. Her phone lit up instantly. Messages from colleagues, reporters, even her sister. "You're on the news." Tara turned off the phone. She walked to the gym, stepped onto the mat and began her routine. 1-2. Breathe, reset. The bag swung indifferent. Discipline meant controlling what you could and outlasting what you couldn't. By the time she finished, sweat traced slow lines down her spine, heartbeat steady. The noise could have her name. It would never have her truth. A week later, she was summoned again, this time not to D.C., but to a field evaluation near Norfolk. The Navy was testing the new joint curriculum. She arrived early, clipboard in hand, standing behind the observation glass. Inside the training bay, officers ran her blindfold reflex drills, the same pattern, the same rhythm. But something was off. They modified it, turned it competitive. A scoreboard flashed reactions and hits. The instructors were shouting again, louder than the recruits. Her stomach sank. She turned to the program manager beside her. Who approved this change? Command wanted measurable data, he said. Makes it easier to justify funding. Tara stared through the glass, recruits lunging too early, flinching too fast, turning control back into chaos. It looked efficient. It sounded wrong. She stepped into the bay. The shouting stopped instantly. Commander Reeves, one officer greeted, nervous. We're running the adaptive version. You're running noise, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air. Blindfold off, everyone reset. They obeyed. She walked to the center of the mat. No scores, no timers, no spectators. Just breathing. Just contact. Again. They ran it her way. Quiet, slow. By the third round, the panic melted into rhythm again. When it ended, she looked toward the observation glass, where the same program manager stood, pale. You can't quantify calm, she told him. Stop trying. Then she left the room. That night she filed a formal report to command, blunt, precise, unembellished. Control reduced to competition defeats purpose. Recommend immediate course correction. It wasn't rebellious. It was loyal to what mattered. 2 days later, Grayson called. You don't make my job easy, Commander. I'm not supposed to, she said. He sighed. You know they'll water it down anyway. Then I'll keep reminding them where it started. You think you can hold the line alone? I don't have to, she said. I trained replacements. He didn't answer for a long time. Then quietly, you really believe silence can protect an institution? No, sir, she replied, but it can shame it into remembering. Weeks rolled on. The revised drills were reinstated her way. The scoreboard disappeared. And somewhere inside the bureaucracy, a quiet respect began to grow again. Not loud. Not public. Just real. One evening, as the sun bled orange across the training field, Chen approached her with a folded sheet of paper. What's this? Tara asked. A letter, Chen said. From Dahlin, he's retiring. He asked me to give you this. Tara unfolded it slowly. Commander Reeves, you taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. I used to think command was about volume. Turns out it's about velocity, the kind that slows down when it matters. Thank you for not breaking me, even when I deserved it. She folded the note, tucked it into her pocket. Chen studied her face. You okay, ma'am? Tara nodded, better than I was. She looked out across the field, recruits sparring in silence, timing perfect, movements exact. You see that, she said quietly. That's the sound of legacy. No noise, just continuity. Later that night, she sat alone in her office, the lights low. A single lamp lit the stack of manuals on her desk, Leadership Under Pressure, the Reeves model. She ran her fingers along the cover. Not pride. Just acceptance. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows, the same rhythm as the sea she still missed. She whispered into the dark, as if speaking to the echo of that first day on the mat. You can change the system quietly, if you're willing to let it take credit. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew that was the final test of restraint. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't staying silent when hit. It's staying silent when praised for the wrong reasons. She leaned back, eyes closing, heartbeat steady. Tomorrow would bring another meeting, another modification, another argument between precision and pride. She'd show up anyway. Because patience wasn't a pose. It was a promise. Every story that begins with pain ends somewhere quieter. Not softer, quieter. Because silence isn't weakness. It's what comes after strength learns how to breathe. Years had passed since that day on the mat. The elbow. The bruise. The rumor that turned into doctrine. The Navy had changed, subtly, unevenly, imperfectly. But changed nonetheless. And Lieutenant Commander Tara Reeves had become something she never sought to be. A name people quoted when they forgot how it all began. To some, she was legend. To others, controversy. But to those who trained under her, she was simply the one who never raised her voice. The leadership wing had grown larger now, new facilities, more staff, more noise. Even success had a hum to it. Tara stood outside the hangar before dawn, coffee in hand, watching the fog roll off the pines. She'd grown older, her hair tied tighter, her gaze sharper, her voice softer. Time didn't harden her, it clarified her. Behind her, voices called out drills beginning, instructors coordinating. She didn't need to oversee them anymore. They'd learned how to run the rhythm themselves. Chen was now Commander Chen. Monroe had taken over officer evaluations. Keller was leading operations abroad. Each of them carried a fragment of her calm, passed down, reinterpreted, reshaped. That was legacy. Not fame. Continuity. The morning routine was broken by a knock on her office door. A courier, young, nervous, too careful with posture. "Commander Reeves?" he asked. "Yes." He handed her an envelope. "Orders, ma'am, from Command Authority." She opened it. Read twice. Then leaned back silent. Effective immediately, Commander Tara Reeves is to be reassigned to the Naval Ethics Board, Washington, D.C., Chair, Leadership Review Division. Another transfer. But this one was different. This one came not from reprimand, but from respect. She smiled faintly. "They never do let me stay still," she murmured. The courier blinked. "Ma'am." "Nothing," she said. "Thank you." He saluted awkwardly and left. That evening she sat alone in the empty gym, the same space where she had once been struck, once been tested. The mats were newer now, the air cleaner. But the ghosts remained, quiet, patient, disciplined. She stepped onto the mat, slow, barefoot. Every echo beneath her feet felt like memory. The training lights dimmed automatically at 1900 hours. The silence deepened. She spoke to it. "Do you remember Tara?" she whispered. The question wasn't to herself, not really. It was to the version of her that had stood here once before, bruised, humiliated, burning with quiet fire. "You didn't hit back," she said softly. "You just waited." She smiled, and that changed everything. Later that night, Chen found her there, still seated on the mat. "Ma'am." Tara turned, calm as always. "They told me about your reassignment," Chen said. "Congratulations." "Thank you." Chen hesitated. "We'll miss you here." "I'll still be watching," Tara said with a small grin. Different mat, same silence. Chen smiled, then grew thoughtful. "Do you ever regret not fighting harder that day?" Tara's eyes flickered with reflection. "I did fight," she said quietly. "I just chose the weapon no one expected." "What weapon?" "Restraint." Chen nodded slowly. "I think that's harder." "It always is." They sat in silence for a moment, 2 generations of soldiers breathing the same discipline. "Carry it forward," Tara said finally. "But don't copy me. Find your own calm. The world doesn't need another me, it needs someone who remembers why I existed." Chen nodded. "Aye, ma'am." Her departure ceremony was modest, the way she liked it. No speeches, no grand send-off. Just a folded flag, a few handshakes, and the sound of recruits training in the distance. As she walked across the tarmac toward the waiting aircraft, the wind caught the edge of her uniform. She glanced back once. Rows of young officers stood silently in formation, not saluting, not cheering. Just standing still, quiet, aligned. She felt a pulse of pride deep in her chest. That's it, she thought, that's the lesson. Respect without instruction. Order without fear. Control without noise. Washington felt different this time. Last time, she'd come here to defend integrity. Now she came to enforce it. The Naval Ethics Board was a place where decisions were made in whispers, where careers ended, policies began, and truth was weighed like classified cargo. Her new office overlooked the Capitol. The nameplate on her desk read, Commander T. Reeves, Leadership Review Division Chair. She laughed softly when she saw it. After all these years, the system that once tried to silence her now reported to her for clarity. Her days filled with reports, misconduct reviews, ethics audits, leadership evaluations. She read them all with the same patient calm she'd taught others. And sometimes, when the room fell quiet between meetings, she would close her eyes and hear the echo of the mat, the sound of restraint reborn as memory. One afternoon, while reviewing disciplinary files, she found a familiar name. Lieutenant Markson, the same officer who had laughed that day in the gym. Now charged with verbal escalation during training exercise. She exhaled slowly. Life had a strange rhythm. The wheel always came full circle. She read his report carefully, line by line, then typed her conclusion at the bottom. Recommend counseling and reassignment. Remember, control begins where noise ends. No vengeance. Just balance. Months passed. Her days became quiet again, meetings, evaluations, long walks along the river before dawn. Every so often, a letter would arrive from one of her former trainees. Monroe wrote from the Mediterranean. We used your silence technique during a boarding op. It saved lives. Keller wrote from Guam. I finally understand what you meant about breathing before reacting. Thank you. Chen sent pictures of new recruits practicing Reeves rounds under open skis. Each message carried a thread of the same lesson, control, alive and moving. She never replied to most of them. Not because she didn't care, but because some lessons need no echo. One night a storm rolled in over D.C. Rain battered the windows, thunder low and distant. Tyra stayed late in her office, reading old reports, her own from years ago. Her eyes paused on one line, buried deep in an old personnel review. Reeves displays excessive restraint in conflict scenarios. She smiled. What once condemned her had become her legacy. She closed the folder, stood, and looked at her reflection in the dark window. The lightning flashed once, illuminating her face, older, calm, unbreakable. She whispered, almost to the rain, You see, silence wins eventually. The next morning, she visited the Navy Memorial before sunrise. The marble stones were wet, glistening. She stood before the wall of names, friends, mentors, strangers bound by service. Somewhere in those names were stories that had never been told. Some louder, some quieter. She touched the cold surface with her fingertips. Thank you, she whispered. Then added softly, and I'm sorry it took this long for them to listen. As the sun rose, she turned to leave. A young officer stood nearby, saluting nervously. Commander Reeves, he asked. She stopped, yes. I just wanted to say, my instructor used to quote you all the time. She smiled faintly. Did he now? Yes, ma'am. He said you taught him that dignity doesn't yell. Tara nodded. He was right. The young man lowered his salute. Does it ever get easier, ma'am, staying calm? She thought about it, the years, the scars, the silence. No, she said quietly, but it gets clearer. He nodded, thoughtful, and walked away. Tara watched him go, the wind lifting the edge of her coat. She stood there for a long moment, the sun breaking over the horizon, light reflecting across wet stone. Every bruise, every silence, every lesson, it all led here. The Navy didn't remember every word she'd said, but it remembered how she stood. Unmoving, unshaken, uncompromised. And as she turned to go, a single thought surfaced, clear, final, true. Sometimes power doesn't roar. Sometimes it waits. And when it finally speaks, the whole room listens. Not because it's loud, but because it's earned. She smiled, walking toward the light. Because after all these years, she'd learned the simplest truth of all. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.